Matthew chapter 9, making our way through the chapter. This is got a whole long list of miracles. Actually, the miracles are kind of intertwined and all that. So we are discussing the miracle then in the section that's 18 to the whole thing is into the house. Well, it all goes one after another. So we're talking about the woman who was healed by touching his garment. Basically, that's what we were talking about. So that's at the top of page 15 in our notes. Top of page 15. On the way, Jesus encounters a woman suffering from a bleeding disorder. She believed even the slightest contact with Jesus would heal her. It's because of her uncleanness, that she decided to approach Jesus in a stealthy manner. The other gospel writers talk about a fringe on Jesus' clothes and touch the fringe. Some of the gospel writers mention that, others don't. It's kind of an interesting thing when we talk about Jesus being clothed in certain ways. There are those who are convinced, Bible scholars who are convinced that Jesus dressed like a rabbi sometimes, and other times dressed in ordinary clothes. Now we know from Josephus, the historian, and from other sources that rabbis, especially around Jerusalem and Judea, had kind of a distinctive garb, distinctive robes and whatever, so they would kind of set them apart. We're told that you could tell who was a Levite, who was on duty as an active priest, who was a Sadducee, who was a Pharisee, and kind of their rank even, and who was a rabbi of a synagogue, and who was an itinerant rabbi, that is, a rabbi who was recognized as a rabbi but did not have a synagogue where he preached regularly. So these people were told we could tell from their clothing what they were, what they're. This might explain a couple of things about during Jesus' life. There are times when Jesus is in a crowd of people, and we're told that he just makes his way through the crowd. He just basically disappears in the crowd. I think this is because, remember what Isaiah says about his likeness, about what he looked like. Isaiah prophesies that there would be nothing about his physical appearance that would set him apart, make him distinctive. In other words, you could not look at Jesus and he was so beautiful, like our paintings that we have. He was so amazing, so handsome, that you would immediately see, oh, this has got to be the Messiah, or at least this has got to be somebody, tremendously blessed by God. Isaiah says the opposite. Isaiah says that he's actually homely. He's actually not that good looking. He's very average, blends right in. So this may explain why sometimes people come up to Jesus and say, they don't know him from anybody, they just walk up to him and say, Rabbi. Why would they do that? Unless he was dressed as a rabbi. Okay, makes sense? I think so. Other times, he's in a crowd, he's talking to a crowd, and the crowd closes in on him and he disappears. Now, some scholars think, okay, this is a miracle. He makes himself invisible. That's not a miracle that's ever recorded anywhere. That's specific. That's actually the Bible writers actually say he became invisible. That's not what it says. They always say he got lost in the crowd. Well, how do you get lost in a crowd if you're dressed very distinctively? You don't. So This is why some scholars, and I myself personally believe, that at times Jesus put on his clerical garb, like a Catholic priest would dress up. You could tell right away that's a Catholic priest or Episcopal priest, okay? And other times he dressed commonly. I think we can probably say that most of the time in Galilee, he dressed like an average guy. He dressed like a fisherman would dress or a carpenter. But when he was down in Judea and around Jerusalem, I think he dressed like a rabbi, so that he could be seen as being on equal plane with the people that he was arguing with. Can't prove it. Can't prove it at all. But it makes perfect sense. And it fits with this miracle where he's got a fringe. The fringe was worn by the rabbis. So it makes sense that this is possible. Now, this woman, because she had this particular illness, some kind of bleeding illness, okay? Bible does not go into detail. Even Luke, the physician, does not describe this bleeding any more than that. So we can't really say, was it from orifice some kind, genitals, whatever, or was it from someplace else, ears, or we don't know. All we know is she was bleeding all the time. Because of that, because of the rules of Moses way back in the Exodus, if you had a wound like that, you were not able to go to the temple. Now, it's true, the women, of course, were not able to go into the main temple area. They could only go into what's called the court of the women. But she couldn't even do that. So she couldn't even go. There were lessons done, there were sermons given, there were things you could do in the court of the women. She couldn't even do that. So for all these years, she was unable to go to the temple. And even though she had survived, obviously, she had survived this bleeding, that the bleeding wasn't bad enough that it killed her, but it must have been miserable. It must have been very difficult for her to deal with. And so when she sees Jesus going down the street, she thinks to herself, well, if I just touch the fringe of his garment, I'll be healed. And of course she was. Next point, Christ would not let her secret contact with him go unnoticed. This is the only recorded use of the endearment daughter. He draws attention to her to show her faith to those in the company, in the group. And her disorder was relieved. Now, this is interesting. The only time Jesus uses this term of endearment as being a daughter. He uses other terms of endearment with his mother and with other women, but this is the only time that he uses this particular term. No one has ever exhibited the empathetic powers of Jesus, I would say, to his extent. He really did have a great sympathy and a great understanding and empathy for people who were suffering. I think we can gain a lesson from this. God is not what you would call a stoic, okay? People have a sense, unfortunately, of God the Father in particular, and God in general, of being a stoic. What's a stoic? No. Stoic. Okay. How so? Untouchable as far as the emotions are concerned. A stoic is somebody who basically could not care less. That's a stoic. If you are suffering, and you are seen by somebody as a person who grins and bears it, that's being stoic. Okay? That's being, you're unmoved by whatever trepidations are coming upon you. Okay? You're stoic. Okay? You know, come what may, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my ship. I don't care. You know, do your worst, world. Okay? That's a Stoic attitude. The Stoics were a group of philosophers in Greece. Okay? And the Stoics believed in living a very harsh life and in not showing emotions, not being moved by death of somebody, not being moved by child's laughter, not being moved by the beauty of a woman, not being moved by the great taste of food, not being moved by a wonderful wine. Okay? Stoics, there were two groups that opposed each other in their philosophy at this time in Greece. The Stoics were untouchable as far as emotions, could not care less, unmoved, you might say, unmoved, no empathy at all. I like that, heartless. Okay. And then there was the other group that was exactly the opposite. And they were the, I probably won't spell this right, so be nice. Epicureans. I'm not sure if it's an O or it might be an O instead of a U, I'm not sure. Epicureans. And the Epicureans were just the opposite. The Epicureans luxuriated. They loved, they would go do nothing but eat gourmet food, and they would just, oh, this is the greatest thing in the whole world. And they would drink wine and get completely blitzed, you know, and oh, wow, that's great wine. And they would see a woman and they would go and they would put her on a pedestal, you know, oh, this is the most beautiful woman in the world. And they were totally opposite. And if they saw somebody hurt, oh, we're so sorry for you. They were very empathetic. So you had the Stoics and the Epicureans, and they opposed each other, and they would meet in the marketplace in Athens, and they would argue. Okay, well, everybody should be Stoic. No, everybody should be Epicurean. So on. And this then reproduced itself later in Rome. There were Roman Stoics and Roman Epicureans too. It's a very long-lasting philosophy. You might say it's still around today in a lot of places. There are those who are very sensual, okay? Anything to do with the senses, okay? Anything to do with the senses, as high, get them as high as you possibly can. Indulge them as much as you can, okay? Indulge them to the max. Yeah, okay. I guess, okay? Anyway, people tend to think of God the Father, especially, and God in general sometimes, as being a Stoic. That God sits in his heaven, very regal, very unmoved, very above everything, and whatever. And that's wrong. If you look at as God is described and talked about in the Old Testament, there's a lot of passion involved in his dealings with people, with Moses, with Abraham, with David especially, and with others. He has a lot of emotion. He's got a lot of passion. He's got a lot of empathy, got a lot of sympathy. He's very warm. He's very emotional, you might say. Just because he's God does not mean he's not emotional. We think of emotions as being human, okay? We don't think of emotions very often as being divine or godly, which again is why it's important to see Jesus really caring about people. We need to think of God more in that way, not just Jesus in his ministry, but God now, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, all at the same time, having the same kind of empathy, the same kind of sympathy, the same kind of passion, the same kind of emotional understanding, the same kind of desire for our well-being. All right, I think that's very important, and it tends to get forgotten a lot in our thinking and perhaps in our teaching in the Christian church. So this right, which includes his emotions. Right, exactly. Yeah, very good point. Excellent point. Now, the second arrow there, his ability to distinguish between a touch of faith, a touch of curiosity, or a touch of hostility, speaks to this amazing trait. So Jesus could tell, because he has this understanding of people, because he knows what's going on, right? He knows the difference between somebody going to grab him to hurt him somehow, somebody touching him just out of curiosity. Gee, I wonder what this guy feels like. I wonder if he's normal. I wonder if he's a ghost, whatever. And somebody touching him for faith and for healing. Okay, that's he knows the difference, and he knows there how to act. When Jesus reached the ruler's house, the professional mourners were already busy. The Jews did not embalm their dead, so they held their funerals and burials within the hour if possible. Today, I think the rule most places is 24 hours, which is a problem, of course. Some of these people who were killed in the attack on October 17th, 2 years ago, outside of Gaza, along the border of Gaza, some of those people were killed that day. Their bodies were not released. Some other people died during the 2 years of captivity. Their bodies were not released. And so when their bodies were finally released, I think they're all out now. Is there still one missing? Okay. Yeah, I think, and the Arabs or whatever have said, we don't know what happened to them. Yeah, probably buried someplace in a bomb crater or whatever. Anyway, but a lot of them were not able to be buried. Now, I haven't seen anything on this in the newspapers or news reports. I'm wondering, and I kind of doubt this, but Arabs or Muslims have the same rule. Muslims have the same rule. You need to be buried. They did. It's a sin, big sin, huge sin. You can't go to paradise if you're a Muslim. You cannot go to paradise if you're embalmed. As a matter of fact, you cannot go to paradise as a Muslim if your body undergoes an autopsy. Yeah, or cremation. Imagine you're a Muslim, you get murdered. Okay, and the police, whatever, have to do an autopsy to find out how you died, how you were killed. Sorry, you're out of luck. I've been told there are certain ways that a pseudo autopsy can be done, where they can do almost the same thing they would do in an autopsy, but still, if you were autopsied, if you were embalmed, if you were cremated, okay, you can't go to paradise. Okay, no paradise funeral, no 72 virgins. You're out of luck, Chuck. That's all the name of that tune. So I'm wondering, these bodies that were given back to Israel, I wonder if the Muslims buried them in a makeshift kind of way within 24 hours. I don't think so either. But I don't know. Nobody's ever talked about this. There's no mention of this in the news reports about what these funerals they're having for people who died 2 years ago. That's unheard of among Jews. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I don't know what the theological answer is from the various Jewish sects. I would guess that the Hasidim and the ultra-Orthodox would say, tough luck for them. But as we discussed a while back, either in this class or the Sunday class, I'm not sure which, we discussed about the Jews' version of heaven, and the Reformed, they don't care, they don't have a heaven. And so maybe because of that, it really doesn't matter, I don't know. It's interesting that nobody has discussed this. Nobody has brought this up. And I've searched for, the long dead, not being buried among the Jews. What do they say theologically about them? I haven't found anything yet, so I don't know. Okay. Jesus dismissed the mourners and incurred their derision. They laughed at him when he said, hey, she's only sleeping. They misunderstood his comment concerning the girl's death. As far as Jesus was concerned, her death was not permanent. That's really all he's saying. And that's an accurate biblical description. We can also say the same thing. Whether the girl was going to come back to life within an hour or two, or whether a person is coming back to life at the last day, which may be thousands of years after their death. In either case, it can be seen and called and referred to as sleep. Because the soul does not die. So the person, where is your person? Your person is in your soul. That's where your personhood is. That's where your personality is. That's where the thing that makes you, you. Now, we can say, sure, our faces are different, our fingerprints are different, our eye retinas are different, whatever. Okay, that's what makes us us. Yeah, but in a very more personal sense, and going back to Dave's point about God's image, which is everything about God, which includes his moral abilities and whatever. So we can say that because the soul does not sleep, and we're going to hear a little bit about that Sunday in the sermon, because I'm going to talk a little bit about this whole idea of soul sleep, which some Christians, they hold to, for whatever reason they hold to, but it really can't be. Soul sleep can't be because one of the reasons is because of the Transfiguration, which is the festival or feast for this Sunday. And so that's my sermons about the Transfiguration. So souls do not sleep. Souls are active and alive. We're going to see that often. We've already seen it once, but we're going to see it often again in the book of Revelation. When we're looking at the believers who have died and gone to heaven, they're not asleep. They're praising God. They're praying to God. They're requesting that God aid their people they left behind, all right, and so on and so forth. They're active. They're awake. They're doing things as spirits. Now, how can, we've talked about this a little bit already on Sunday. How can John see them? Well, John can see them because it's a vision, obviously. But we don't know what a soul looks like. Nobody's ever seen one, okay, as far as we know. So, so this girl is sleeping. And Jesus was not mistaken. He's not saying she's asleep when he knows very much good and well she is dead, physically dead. That is, earthly dead. She is earthly dead. Okay? But he also knows that she's going to come back to life. Now, again, whether she's going to come back to life in 2 hours or 2,000 years, it doesn't matter. Death is still temporary, which is true for all of us. Death is just temporary. It is temporary. That's all it is. All right, moving on. The girls, as far as Jesus, the death was not permanent. The unbelievers are shown out the door, and the girl is then resurrected. The news of this miracle spread throughout the country. Jesus Christ solves mankind's ultimate problem of death. That is really the ultimate problem. I mean, whether you've got athlete's foot or cancer, whatever disease you have, we all will not get out of this life alive unless Jesus returns first. That's a fact. That's just a fact of existence. Nobody has beaten death yet, except for Jesus, of course. So that's really the problem. And what science is trying to do, and what medicine has been trying to do for now a long time, is try to put that off. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to put it off. They put it off as long as they can. The other day, what day was it? I can't remember the date exactly, but the other day was the anniversary of King Edward's death, the first King Edward. Not the first King Edward, Edward the sixth, Edward the Sixth, the son of Victoria. She died in January. I think he died in January too. Anyway, I take this back. No, this was the father of Elizabeth. Yes, so this was George V. He was euthanized. Nobody knew it at the time. I mean, nobody. And it was not revealed until very recently, I think within the last 10 years. I think before Elizabeth died, it was revealed because somebody mentioned, I was watching the news reports of her sickness, and somebody mentioned that they had euthanized her father. They gave him a fatal dose of morphine. Morphine and something else. Can't remember what it was. It was 2 drugs. They administered 2 drugs to him. They killed him. He was in a lot of pain. He was a mess. Anyway, they euthanized him. Other than those instances, medical science has been trying to keep people alive and trying to extend the lifespan of people. Jesus does that. Faith in Jesus gives us eternal life, and not just a spiritual life as a soul, but soul and body back together again, of course, after the resurrection, for all eternity. Okay? So that is the ultimate cure for the problem, medical problem, if you will, of death. Okay. Took her by the hand. Okay, now we're at verse 27. Any questions about that first healing? The woman with the blood. Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh. After resurrection, yes. Yes. Perfect shape. 6-pack abs. Yes. Yep, perfect shape. Okay, let's read throughout the next 2 miracles. We'll go down to 34. So 27, 34. Jesus went on from there. 2 blind men followed him, crying out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." Here again, they would have had to have recognized him or at least understood who's going by. Now, there's blind guys. Okay? 2 blind men, how are they going to know? How are they going to know? Well, they're going to know maybe because what they hear. Maybe they hear people talking about, "Oh, there's Jesus, there's Jesus, there's Jesus. He's the rabbi." Maybe they even hear people say, "He's just raised somebody from the dead." And they come to the conclusion, this is the Messiah, therefore they use the term Son of David. Could be. When he entered the house, the blind men came up to him. Jesus said to them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" And they said, "Yes, Lord." And he touched their eyes, saying, "It shall be done to you according to your faith." And their eyes were opened, and Jesus sternly warned them, "See that no one knows about this," but they went out and spread the news about him throughout the land. Which, at this point in his ministry, this is what's happening more and more and more. More and more, he's telling people, don't talk about this, and more people are doing exactly that. They're going out and talking about it. And certainly you want to obey, you want to obey God, you want to obey Jesus, but you certainly also can understand why somebody who's cured of blindness, now we don't know if these particular guys were blind from birth or whether they became blind during their lifetime somehow. We don't know. We're not told. But in any case, if you're blind even for few months or years. If you get your sight back, which was unthinkable at that time, it's not possible to be done, you're going to be pretty excited about it. You're going to be pretty happy about it, and you're probably going to tell people about it. So I'm not saying what they did was right. It wasn't, but it's very understandable.
Well, it could be that when they just walked out, people knew they were blind.
Hey,
why are you?
Yeah, where's your cane? Yeah, right. Where's your cane or whatever? Yeah. It could be too. That and so maybe they didn't say anything, but other people said, "Hey, George and Harry over here can see now." And they started telling other people. Whatever. The notes: healing of the two blind men. Isaiah foretold of a day when the blind would be healed. Here we see that day arriving during the ministry of Jesus. Two blind men are seeking mercy and obviously regard Jesus as the Messiah. Instead of healing them immediately, he takes them inside the house and challenges their faith. Do you believe I can do this? Now, this is interesting. Think about this. This is interesting. Jesus doesn't do this very often. It is quite rare. Most of the time, he heals people with no fanfare at all. A lot of times he heals, like this woman with the bleeding problem. He healed her by just her touching his fringe of his clothes. There's other people that were healed for doing very little. And we have the statements of the gospel writers very often in their gospel saying in certain times, and Jesus sat at that crossroads, or he sat on the hill, or he sat in a village, and countless people were brought to him, and he healed all of them that came. And he drove out demons, and didn't say anything. Nothing was said. Nothing. Are you a believer? Are you a Jew? Are you a Samaritan? Are you this? Are you that? Are you whatever? Okay. Like with the lepers, the 10 lepers. Just he didn't say anything to them about what they believed one way or another. He just sent them and said, "Go show yourselves to the priest." Okay. So this is unusual. This is unusual that Jesus stops. He doesn't heal him right away. Hey, come on, let's talk. Let's have a little, discussion about this. He says, "Do you believe I am able to do this really?" Okay. Yeah, okay. All right, fine. You're healed. Why do you suppose he does that in some occasions like this? Again, few. And other times, doesn't seem to care. Yes, sir.
Probably so they can verbalize their faith in him. Because if they say no, then you don't have faith in him. If you say yes, you do have.
Well, but is faith required for him to miraculously heal somebody? No. If we assume, and I'm not sure it's fair to do that, but let's just do it anyway. If we assume that the 9 lepers did not come back and thank Jesus because they're a bunch of unbelievers, a bunch of pagans, let's just assume that for a minute. They still got healed, didn't they? Yeah, they did. Okay? And again, all these people that are being brought to Jesus various times in his ministry, and he heals them all. There's no discussion about who's a believer and who's not. Okay? Now, these occasions where Jesus says, "Do you believe I am who I say I am?" Or, "Do you believe I can do this?" Or sometimes he doesn't ask them anything, but at the end he says, "Your faith has saved you," or brought about this miracle. Is saving faith necessary for a miracle? No, cannot be. There are too many examples of rank unbelievers receiving miracles from God. Okay?
Well, the thing is, it's possible that by this miracle, it's going to bring.
True. That's very true. That's very possible. But in many cases, we're not told that. We can't declare that as a fact. We cannot declare as a fact, either one, that you have to have saving faith in order to be healed, or two, that the healing, every time a miracle of healing happens, it changes that person to a believer, if they're an unbeliever. We can't say either one of those things because the Bible doesn't say either one of those things. Those things are, we cannot claim those things. Okay? So it seems that there are occasions where Jesus wants to connect saving faith to the miracle in some way. Not as a cause, no. Or not even as a result. Okay? But as something that then appreciates what God has done.
Well, is it possible that he does it because they're a fence setter? I'm not sure if they're-
There are no fence setters. There are no mugwumps. You know what a mugwump is? You know what a mugwump is? That's somebody who's sitting on a fence with their mug over one side and their wump over the other side. That's a mugwump. Mugwump. Remember that one. That's a mugwump. Okay. I don't know where my grandpa got that, but wherever he got that, I thought when he told me that, I just laughed. I laughed all day. I thought that was a... Anyway, there are no mugwumps in Christianity. There's not possible for a person to be in between. You are either a believer and saved, or you're an unbeliever and unsaved. Now, you can be an unbeliever and be unsaved and be curious, yes. And you can be an unbeliever and unsaved and wonder, I wonder if that Jesus guy is all he's cracked up to be. And then the Holy Spirit eventually convinces you, okay? So you go instantaneously. We talked about this a lot back in Bible Basics a couple years ago when we talked all about conversion. We spent a couple months on conversion. Conversion is not a process. People don't go from unbeliever to believer, and we'll just talk about that one right now, from unbeliever to believer over a long period of time, or even hours, or I would say even minutes. Okay? That does not happen. You're not an unbeliever, and then you're kind of sorta a believer, and then you're a believer. No. Conversion is instantaneous. In a twinkling of an eye, less than that, less than a split second, a person goes from unbeliever to believer. Now, this is partly the reason why no one can say when they were converted. The Baptists, for example, among some others, insist that you must be able to tell the moment of your conversion. Why? Well, it's important to them because that's their saving moment. That's the thing they hang on to. We hang on to our baptism, or not. If we were converted later in life, we may hang on to our confirmation date, or maybe if we're baptized as an adult, we hang on to that. Okay, but I got to tell you, most of the adults that I baptize are already believers. Okay. As a matter of fact, I would say this: almost 100% of the people I've ever baptized, including infants 1 day old, or even in the hospital sometimes infants 1 hour old, are already believers. Because their mothers were in church all the time in those cases. And those babies heard the mother say the Apostles' Creed, and that's full of gospel. Nicene Creed, same thing. Heard the sermon, same thing. Read the readings in the bulletin, for example, or the meditations at home, or Bible at home, okay? Or sing a hymn. A lot of hymns are full of gospel. They're full of saving gospel. Okay? Baby hears that. By the time I baptize that baby, whether it's a week later, a month later, a year later, or 5 minutes later, I firmly believe they're already believers. But we still do that because, of course, it's commanded, and because, just in case it hadn't worked yet, it does give saving faith. Baptism gives saving faith. So that's why we do it. But the point is that the Baptists who don't believe that baptism is a sacrament, obviously, and so they have to hang on something else. There have to be something else that they look to say, yes, at that moment, I am a believer and I am saved. Okay, and so they choose their moment of decision when they go up to the altar and make that declaration for Christ. I give myself to Jesus, or what, or like Billy Graham, or Franklin Graham. I don't know if any of you watch regular TV anymore, but on television, Franklin Graham's been on there the last, couple of weeks, talking about praying the sinner's prayer. If you've prayed the sinner's prayer, bingo, you're a believer. Okay, so and you need to mark that down. If you go to a Baptist church, they'll tell you, when did you? Well, I was watching the Late Show at 11:30, Tuesday night, and I saw Franklin come on, and I decided, by George, I'm going to do that. And so they'll tell you, whoa, write that down. 11:35 p.m. Yeah. So they don't believe baptism is saving. They don't believe it's a sacrament. They're called Baptists because they get baptized as adults. They used to be called, much more accurate term, in the Reformation days. Okay, they were called. I'll get rid of some of this stuff. In Reformation days, they were called Anabaptists, meaning anti-baptism. They did not believe in infant baptism. And you can understand why. I mean, really, you can. Because what they did, this was after the Reformation. The Reformation began, this was 10 years, maybe 20 years into the Reformation. Luther, of course, was making these points about the Roman Church being so wrong about many things. And so some Protestants, following Luther, they looked around and they said, how come all of these priests and bishops and monsignors and cardinals and archbishops and these popes, how come they're so evil? And they were, a lot of them. They're so evil, they're so greedy, they're so sensual, worldly, materialistic, lying, cheating, lustful, gluttonous, you name it, okay? They said, how could this be? And they decided, this is what they decided. They said, we're thinking that maybe this baptizing them at 2 days old or 3 days old just isn't cutting it. It's not doing the trick, right? Obviously, these people are not saved. And so they got to the point, they're also anti-sacramentarians. They're not just against baptism, they're against all sacraments. They don't believe in any sacraments, okay? They said these sacraments, like the 7 sacraments in the Roman Church, all right, obviously aren't doing anybody any good. Because look at them. They do all 7 sacraments, or, well, no one can do all 7, I guess. You can only do 6. It was a long story. But anyway, people are doing, let's say 5, okay. You haven't had extreme unction. You haven't had last rites yet, so you're doing 5, okay. You're getting baptized. You're getting First Communion. So Lord's Supper, you're getting confirmed. That's a sacrament in the Roman Church, all right? You're getting married. Okay? I guess those are the big 4. Yeah, you get married in the church. That's a sacrament in the Roman Church. You haven't had extreme unction. You haven't had last rites yet, and you're not a priest. You can't be priest and get married, so you can't get all 7. That's why you can't get all 7. But anyway, so you got the big 4. Everybody's got the big 4. All the king, like King Edward, Edward II, who took anybody and everybody to bed, had sex with everybody and everything, including a lot of animals. Okay, he was crazy, right? Or other kings. But all of these people went through all those 4 sacraments. They all made the big 4. Okay, the big 4. They all made them. And so the Anabaptists, the followers of Luther, but disagreeing now with Luther, saying, Luther, hey, obviously these sacrament things, they don't do any good. Look at all these people that had the sacraments, and look at them. They're horrible and evil and nasty and rotten. So you need to put off doing these things like that, like baptism, like Lord's Supper. You need to put them off until they're of an age of reason, so they can make a decision, so they can actually decide to be good. Okay? That didn't work either, but yeah. They didn't find that out for a while, and so they became anti-sacramentarians, or then especially Anabaptists, and they really hated infant baptism because they said this gives people a false sense of security, a false sense of religious security, a false sense of salvation. Oh, I've been baptized. Okay, I'm good. I don't need to do anything else. And actually, that happens a lot. That it does. And so I sympathize with these guys. I don't agree with them. They're wrong according to the Bible, but their logic, their reason is good. Okay, because I have confirmed a lot of people over the years. I don't know how many, hundreds. I've confirmed a lot of people, brought them into the church, accepted them by profession of faith, whatever. Taken a lot of people in the church, and I've got a long list just in this location. I don't even talk about the other 4 churches I've been pastor of. Long list of people who, for as far as I can tell, don't care one whit anymore about God, Bible, Jesus, or anything else. As far as I know, they've fallen away. So does it do them any good? Not that I can see. I don't know for sure, because I can't read hearts. But I really do. I sympathize. The guy's name who really pushed this hard first time, early, was a guy by the name of Zwingli. In Switzerland. Calvin also. Zwingli and Calvin were the 2 big ones who protested against infant baptism, big time. Yes, sir.
Doesn't the Baptists often believe in more than one baptism throughout their lifetime as they commit sins, for the forgiveness of sins?
Some do, and some don't. Some will be rebaptized because, again, they don't feel like the first one took.
Is that determined by the ministry?
But normally, normally normally that's an individual decision. But normally, most Baptists won't bother getting rebaptized. Most Baptists will just go and make their decision again, do another altar call. This is what they do at revivals. Okay, so Baptists see you make a decision, you're saved, and then you become a backslider. Okay, so you backslide into unbelief. They say this happens all the time. More often than you change your shirt. That's the expression that they use. Okay? And so then you need to go to revival, do another altar call, make your decision again. Okay? And then try to stick to it. But eventually, you'll backslide. So, then you need to go back to revival, make your decision. Okay? So yeah, it's a constant process. It's a constant process. And it's all based on their feeling. It's all based on their emotion. Was I good today? Was I bad today? Was I a good Christian today? Was I a nasty, rotten person today? Did I do something wrong today? Did I do something wrong that makes me wonder if I'm still saved or not? And it doesn't do any good to ask them, oh, don't you believe Jesus? Yeah, sure, I believe Jesus is my Savior, but the devil believes in Jesus, so what? Which is the Bible says. Devil believes in Jesus. It doesn't do him any good. He's still damned. So the Baptist will say, no, I got to make that commitment. I got to remake that commitment. And I got to do it again and again and again and again my whole life. And what I got to hope, what I got to really hold out hope for is that the moment that I die, I'm not a backslider. You don't want to die as a backslider. No, don't want to die as a backslider. If you die as a backslider, That's right. That's exactly right. You got it. That's exactly the reason. They have these rivals all the time. And that's also why there's a difference between the way a Lutheran looks at a believer's death, an Orthodox Lutheran, a confessional Lutheran, and a Baptist. Okay? So you're the elder of the church. And you're at a convention, American Legion convention, VFW convention, whatever, Odd Fellows, whatever. You're at a convention. And the liquor is flowing pretty freely, and you're feeling pretty good for yourself, and everything's nice, and and you meet up with one of the barmaids after closing, and you go up to your room, and you have a really good time. And then the next morning, you get up and you drive your car back home, and on the way back home, you miss a curve and hit your telephone pole and are killed instantly. And the news comes out in your hometown that Elder Jenkins got drunk Wednesday evening and then had a meeting with a lady of the evening in his hotel room, and then the next morning drove home and killed himself, or drove into a telephone pole and died. First Baptist Church will not be holding his funeral because he died as an unbelieving pagan. Now, they're not going to say that in the newspaper, but I can guarantee you the pastor of First Baptist Church is not going to do that funeral, at least not in the church. He may do it at the funeral home, but he ain't going to do it in the church. And if it was a couple hundred years ago, he wouldn't be buried in hallowed ground. All the cemeteries were by churches, right? Still are back in the Holy Land, right? That's the difference. Lutheran pastor, okay, I'm going to bury that guy. Not only because I bury anybody, because guess what? Funerals aren't for the dead. Funerals are for the living, okay? So I don't really care how the guy died. I mean, I may have to make some excuses and explain some things if he was the town drunk or whatever. But I want to talk to the people who are alive. Okay? So that's why I always promised I'd bury Dutch. Always promised. Dutch, I'll bury you. If you want me to, I'll bury you. I'll say words over you. Because I figured we get a good crowd in here for that day. And a whole bunch of his fellow atheists, and I would get a chance to preach the gospel to them. Anyway, that's the difference. See, if he was my elder, I would say, okay, he fell off the wagon, he fell into sin, okay, but we sin much every day, as Luther says. Okay, how are we going to know for sure that we're going to die at the moment when we're not sinning? I guess if we're in our sleep, maybe we got a 99% chance. But other than that, how can we be sure that we're not going to die, express our last breath, and that last breath, cussing out somebody in the next car who just smashed into us? And so what am I going to do? Somebody says, well, some of the police officer comes up to me and says, who do you know this guy? Yeah, I know this guy. That's Fred. That's good old Fred. Well, I got to tell you, Pastor, the last words out of Fred's mouth was looking at the guy who hit him saying, not much of a church member if you ask me. I'll still bury Fred. And I'll bury Fred as a good Christian, and I'll say, Fred's in heaven. And I won't feel bad about it, and I don't feel bashful about it. Because saving faith is not like the Baptists say, where you're in and you're out and you're off and you're on, and maybe you are and maybe you're not, you know. Okay? Jesus said, not one from my hand will I lose, not one. So we have two doctrines that are contradictory, I will say. I admit they're contradictory, but they're both doctrines in the Bible. One doctrine is you should be absolutely sure 100% every day, every minute, every day that you're going to heaven. That you are a believer and you're going to heaven every day. Never should doubt that, ever. Because your name, you should believe that your name is written in the book of life and you are predestined to go to heaven. You should believe that every second of every day. On the other hand, the Bible also says, be careful that you don't fall away. Now, you're going to ask me, Pastor, that doesn't make any sense. If we can be absolutely sure that we're going to heaven, then we're never going to fall away and we shouldn't worry about it. You're right. On the other hand, the Bible warns us of falling away, so we better continually keep close contact with this thing. And again, I will say, you're right. Both are true, even though they contradict each other. Both are true. The Bible teaches what the Bible teaches. Oh, we didn't get to the demon-possessed guy. I saw a hand up someplace. Did I see a hand?
No, I was just going to say, when you were talking about choosing Christ and stuff like
Yeah.
that, I don't know when I had faith, but I know it was when I was younger. But I do know when I don't come to church, when I don't come to Bible study, my inner being said, you shouldn't be going.
That's just good sanctification.
Well, no, I mean, it's like, you know you should go.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you're sitting here making excuses.
Yeah.
You know, you should go. And so I can't tell you when the Spirit hit me, but I know it was when I was younger.
Yeah.
But I can certainly tell you when Satan is trying to keep you.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking about the word habit.
Uh-huh.
Bad habits, good habits.
Uh-huh,
So
uh-huh.
like this good habit, the habit of going to church every Sunday and Bible study.
Right,
all
right.
Good habit.
Right. Yep.
Bad habits, alcohol, sex.
Yep.
You name
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it can be excessive.
Right.
And food, you name it.
Yep.
But,
Yep.
you know, when we die, whether we're in the act of one versus the other is undetermined, other than I think in a sense the Lord directs us.
Right.
You ask yourself why did that die?
Right.
Whatever. And, you know.
Yep.
So up to him as far as I'm
It is. It is.
Church and Bible study, all that helps you be on the right.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. That's the point. That's the point. And you know, and this is another thing that's important to note. This is the purpose of the church. And this is the purpose of the ministry. You know, whether I'm somebody's good friend or not doesn't matter. Whether they're my friend doesn't matter. Whether they like me, whether they don't like me, whether I like them, whether they don't like me, doesn't matter. Whether I give them $20 on a bad day or give them money for the soup kitchen, that's not the purpose of the church. I mean, it's nice, it's charity and everything, that's great, that's wonderful, but it's not the purpose of the church. This is the purpose of the church. Preaching and teaching, ministering the sacraments. That's the purpose of the church. And if a church, I just talked to a pastor about this just yesterday. I took pastor out to lunch yesterday in Tucson, and I told him it doesn't matter what else the church does. You know, he was well worried. You know, well, the church doesn't do a whole lot. Doesn't have a lot of activities. Doesn't have a lot of, you know, programs. And I said, it doesn't matter. You know, as long as you preach the gospel, and teach the Bible and administer the sacraments, you're doing what the church is supposed to be doing. Everything else is gravy. Everything else is frosting. And I see way too many churches who are busying themselves with soup kitchens and food pantries and, helping the poor and doing for the homeless, and which is all nice, yeah, but their sermons are terrible. They don't have the sacraments maybe, and their Bible classes are very poor. It's not really revealing and strengthening people in the Word, and all like that. And so I tell pastors, young pastors especially coming up, do the important things first. Make sure you do that better than you can do anything else in your life. And then if you've got energy left over, if you've got time left over, if you've got money left over, fine, then do some of those things. But keep number one, right?
Yeah, feed your flock first.
There you go.
But also, Waukesha has to realize that the average age of your congregation here is 140 years old. So these people don't have a lot of energy to do anything. They can't even make it to Sunday. So
Excuse me.
we've had this discussion.
No, you're right, and nobody up there has bugged me about this church in decades. So and they know better. They know better. They know better than to try that. But no, that's not a problem. But it is a problem with some people, and it is a problem. Sometimes we get new members who come from the Holy Land, and their churches are huge, 1,000 members, and they do all kinds of stuff, and they come here and say, hey, we're not doing a whole lot. I said, well, we're doing what we can. That's it. We're doing what we can. So okay, that's it. We'll pick it up at verse 32 next time. We'll try to get a little further next time.